January 11th, 1990 episode of Later with Bob Costas is a fascinating one. Not just because it's a musician, in this case Stewart Copeland, best known as drummer of the Police, but because of Copeland's upbringing and his interests in intellect. Son of Miles Copeland, famous CIA huge figure, Stewart grew up in Lebanon, Syria, and Beirut. He thought his dad was just a businessman consulting to the oil companies. He said his parents threw a lot of cocktail parties, meeting the next new dude that would be propped up by his dad's real job. But anyhow, he got raised listening to Arabic music. And he had a Pakistani nanny, and hey, that's a great name for a man, Pakistani nanny. Jeez Louise. Anyhow, he didn't come up with that one, I did. Costas asks him about his attitude of, hey, you're a punk rocker. After you were in Curved Air, he was first like a prog rocker, actually. But a punk rocker whose dad was in the CIA. How do you reconcile all that? And totally pro-America, totally pro-CIA, looks them as the eyes and the ears, and it's the politicians who screw things up. And great perspective on how things actually work. And this guy's been exposed to it in a couple of different venues. He was on the promotional tour of the Animal Logic album with Stanley Clarke, and speaks about Stanley as a bass player and a giant, and Deborah Howland, who's the girl that sings the songs and wrote them for Animal Logic. And he also significantly talks about Holy Blood and Crescent Moon, the opera he was commissioned to write, and the process he went through turning onto a Wagner and world premiering it in Cleveland, Ohio. And I've got almost 40 hours of video of the world premiere of that opera that only had 5 performances ever. And Copeland's hilarious, talking about the reviewers, and I wonder which of the Cleveland review folks are quoted here in this interview. So enjoy. It's a great one.
Thanks for staying up later. We're joined tonight by Stuart Copeland, the drummer and founder for the Police. Now an ex-cop, I guess, is the way you can put it, and off on your own.
Well, no, actually, I'm still a cop. I'm an honorary lieutenant in the New Orleans Police Department.
What a fine honor that is.
Oh, yeah. Stops me getting speeding tickets all the time.
They decorated you on Bourbon Street and everything?
No, they just gave me a little card.
If you had to pick 2 or 3 police compositions, police recordings, what would you say would be the most prototypical ones? If someone said, all right, here's the time capsule, this is what goes in there of your work, make the choice, what would it be?
I would choose Message in a Bottle for the energy. I would choose Every Breath You Take for the clever simplicity. And what else? I don't know, you pick a tune.
Well, early on, you might take something like Roxanne, just because it was
okay, all right.
Indicative of the early stuff.
Well, I would take Can't Stand Losing You, as a matter of fact, because I just like that tune a little better.
Now, both of those songs from your first album ran into some censors trouble, didn't they?
Well,
BBC
yes,
wouldn't play them or something?
Yes, there you go. As a matter of fact, that's true. I'd forgotten about that. Roxanne, because it was about a hookah, and Can't Stand Losing You, because it was about suicide. In fact, the single sleeve showed... It was a great sleeve. It showed me from behind with a noose around my neck, standing on a block of ice with a heater next to it, you know, which is fairly creative, I thought.
Did you raise a voice in protest and say, wait a minute, this is not an advocacy of suicide kind of thing? This is tongue-in-cheek, the message is different?
No, we were a punk group at the time, and we wanted to get up. We wanted to ruffle feathers and make it hot for people, and we were proud of the fact. We weren't looking for radio play. We were just looking to sell 2,000 records to our direct fans who came to the gigs. We never expected to get any radio play or to have any mass appeal. In fact, the more we irritated the BBC, the better we felt about things.
How did you reconcile eventually your commercial success with that sensibility early on, that idea that anything that came out of a garage and was angry and really appealed to about 20 people was good, but anything that sold 20 million records couldn't be good?
Well, when I bought my first house, my anger subsided just a little bit.
It has a way of doing that, doesn't it?
I don't know what happened. I still get a little irritated now and then, but I guess it mellows you out. It's amazing, you know, how you start out as a firebrand and then you start getting rewarded for your revolutionary fervor, and you become a lot less revolutionary. In fact, you become part of the status quo, and the status, you know, like if they knock the world over, what's going to happen to my, you know, my bank accounts or something, you know.
Didn't you recently
terrible
make a film kind of on your own where you you went around with and talking to young punks in
oh yes,
in Britain? Now, it's unclear to me, were these just punks in the classic sense, guys hanging out on the street, or were they punk rock performers?
No, they were punks with a capital P, punk rockers. In fact, I went on tour with 4 groups. One was called the Anti-Nowhere League, and the other one was called Cron Gen for Chronic Generation, and the others were called the Bathrooms or something, I don't know, something hostile.
Were they disdainful then of the police and the work you've done?
Yes, they were, yes. I was, by that time I was part of the old guard, but I got along well with them. I could still speak their language.
The days before the police, before you'd hooked up with Sting, you're with a group called Curved Air, and you weren't above a bit of crass self-promotion.
Oh, boy, you've got everything. All the dirt. Well, I'm actually very proud of it now, although I kept it secret for many years. And the secret was that there's a paper, they're a very important trade paper called Melody Maker. It's a music paper. And I had joined this group called Curved Air that had been famous, and I joined it on its declining years. I joined it just as it was fizzling out, as a matter of fact. And I wasn't getting the attention I felt that I deserved as the newcomer of the group. In fact, I was in danger of getting fired every day. So, every town we played in, I wrote letters in different handwriting on different papers saying, who's this incredible new drummer that Curved Air's got? In different ways. And some of them were, you know, like pseudo-intellectual. Some of them were just, that new drummer is great, or what sticks does he use? And just different things on different handwriting. And then mailed them from every town. And sure enough, it appeared. It appeared on the Any Questions page. And they called up and said, look, we've had a question about you, you know, tell us about yourself, who are you? So I gave them my whole life story with and everything, and they printed it. And it had a big picture of me with my drums and seeing through Curved Air's Copeland, because I had this glass drum set, you know. And my whole life story. Well, the question was, what sort of sticks does this amazing new drummer use? Answer, I grew up in Beirut, my life was this, and I'm interested in this and that and the other, I'm this, you know. And it was my first press, and I'm very proud, now that I've grown up, that my first public notice was self-generated.
I guess eventually, the quality of your work, if it's good, or if it's not, its lack of quality will speak for itself and catch up with any publicity. But early on, any mention in a prominent place is perceived as a body of thought, a school of thought. One letter, one article becomes, in the next interview,
becomes a fact.
There are those who say,
exactly,
it makes no difference what they, one guy, one bozo said this thing. How do you respond to those who say, becomes the next thing, and it perpetuates itself?
Well, it becomes, things become facts that are stated. I can't think of any right now, but many times something is stated in one article and it becomes a fact. But really, in that instance there, it's just a question of when you're starting out. Just bring that spotlight over here, shine it on me, I got something to say. And if you got nothing to say, then you get laughed off the stage. And I didn't have anything to say in those days, but that was just the start of it, you know.
When did you first run into Sting?
Well, now, I was playing with Curved Air. At the time, we were up in a town called Newcastle, which is in the north of England, distant little town, and the local journalist there, we had a night off, took us to see his favorite group, which was this jazz band. And they were playing Return to Forever type material and so on, and I was actually bored to tears by the group, except for this bass player, who just had like a light from heaven shining on him. You could just see it from anyone could see it, that he's got that special quality, the X factor. He was playing with his jazz band, playing material. These songs were like, each one of them was 15 minutes long. We shall now play a piece entitled Opus in G, you know, and it was very serious stuff. But It was in a classroom as well. The college that they were playing at wouldn't let them play in the theater, so they were playing in a classroom with a couple of reading lights was their light show. And there was no stage, they were just at one end of a classroom. And they ripped the place up, or rather Sting ripped the place up. And I was introduced to him at the time as Sting. I thought, that's a kind of a dumb name, but I mean, just...
But he was calling himself Sting even then.
Oh yeah, well everyone was, his mom called him Sting. That's what his name is, you know. In fact, you can always tell a fan by if they call him Gordon, you know. And then later on, when I was setting up a punk group, I called him up and said, I was in London, and I said, look, I'm setting up this group, you want to be a part of it? And he was a jazz musician, and he obviously a punk group. Well, it's the only person I know in London, so he came down to London, which he had wanted to do anyway. He had his wife and child and so on, and he knew that he had to get out of Newcastle to the big city. And I was the only person he knew, so he took the job kind of thing.
Yeah.
But very soon he took the job and made it into his own thing. I mean, very quickly he started writing songs, and it wasn't a punk group anymore, it was his group.
Back now with Stuart Copeland. I guess a lot of people are surprised when they find out that you were born, if not raised, in Alexandria, Virginia. They just assume that you're from Britain.
Well, I was born there, but I wasn't raised there. I left when I was about 2 months old and went to Cairo in Egypt. And I didn't come back to the United States until I was 18 years old. So I've been an American all my life, but I've never lived here.
The entire stretch in Cairo or various places?
No, I was a Diplo brat. And my father was transferred to Syria after that when I was about 4. And then Lebanon when I was a little bit older than that. And I was up there until about 18.
Your dad, Miles Copeland, was in the CIA.
That's right. He was one of the founder members, as a matter of fact. And of course, I didn't know anything about this until I was in college, which was right during the A&D period, when the CIA was suddenly becoming very unpopular. And he writes his book, and I see in the liner notes that my dad is a spook. It was very surprising.
How did you adjust to that? What kind of rationalizing did you have to go through to still be on good terms with your dad?
Well, I didn't have anything against the CIA. In Beirut at the time, I lived there for 10 years, and the American meddling in foreign affairs was not such an unfashionable thing to do. In fact, the American public was crying out in the days of, like, the glory days of the FBI. People were saying that the CIA wasn't doing enough. What do you mean they're not knocking off foreign tyrants and things like that? And in 1958, the U.S. Sixth Fleet came and saved Lebanon from a civil war. And this was all orchestrated by underhanded dealing. And it was a very positive event. It saved Lebanon for another 15 years before the same civil war broke out again. And so I didn't have any hostile feelings about the CIA myself. In fact, I regarded it as the eyes and ears of America. As an American living abroad, one is very sensitive to America's behavior in its foreign dealings. And America's intentions have always been very good, better than any other superpower in history. But their actions have often been clouded by ignorance. And so I very much value the eyes and ears of America, and when they start meddling and knocking off people, well, that's a different story. But
how does a CIA parent present himself to, does the wife know, or is it just kept from the kids? And what did you think Daddy did?
I think the wife does know, and I don't actually know. I should ask my mom whether she knew. I think she did. I think they did know. In fact, I think everybody in town probably knows. For me, it just seemed like my parents were having a hell of a time. They threw lots of parties, and Beirut was a very social scene. And I suppose the way they would meet their KGB counterparts, or the colonel that they're intending to install once they've knocked off the current despot, it all happened at cocktail parties. And so my parents seemed to be just living a wild life, entertaining people all the time.
What kind of schools did you go to?
I went to an American school. It's called the American Community School in Beirut. And it was all American kids whose parents were either skullduggerers like my parents, or oil people. A lot of oil people had their kids going there.
So even though from 2 months to 18 you never set foot in America, you had a definite sense that you were an American that entire time?
Absolutely. Merkin. I mean, in fact, I'm more of an American than if I'd grown up in America, because I was surrounded by non-Americans. So I was very distinctly aware of my Americanness. It was a part of my everyday life, whereas if you live in America, everyone's American. and it's no big deal.
When the other kids at the American school in Beirut said, "What does your dad do?" What was your answer?
He's a businessman.
Didn't your
And throws great
curiosity,
parties.
Didn't your curiosity get the better of you by the time you were 12,
Well,
13 years old?
He was a businessman, and he was an advisor to oil companies or something.
Yeah. What were your musical influences as a kid?
Well, there was the Arab debki. There's a lot of music, and I suppose everywhere there's music, but I was steeped in Arabic music coming out of every radio. My Palestinian nanny was a singer, or rather she sang to us a lot, and various kids would come back from the States. You know, their parents would go on home leave or something like that, and they'd come back with records and so on. And I suppose it was Mothers of Invention, Jimi Hendrix, Cream, Beatles, Stones.
How do you suppose, then, that this almost unique filtering of musical influences, the way it came to you as opposed to some of your other contemporaries in popular music, how do you suppose it manifested itself later when you wound up in a recording studio and started writing songs?
Well, I do know that it gave me a very different melodic sense. The notes that I grope for when I'm composing are a different set of notes. And I've often wondered why it is that I can whistle a tune that nobody else thought of, and I guess that it must be that I listened to entirely different melodies and different modes and different scales when I was growing up.
Your new group, Animal Logic. The album is out now?
Yes, the album is out now. It's a new group featuring the bass legend, Lord of the Low Frequencies, Stanley Clarke, and my humble self, and a new discovery.
Chick Corea.
Oh yeah, and Return to Forever. He's played with everybody. He's definitely the top of the bass tree. There is no other. He has no other peer in the bass world. In fact, he's reinvented the bass. But the important thing about this group is something new, which is the singer-songwriter in the group, Deborah Holland, who is the singer-songwriter, and she's the focus of the group. Stanley and I have created this album and the sound to go around her, but she's the important thing. He and I are old ingredients that the world has seen before. She's brand new. She was, when we found her, a piano teacher in Los Angeles who's been writing these songs. She's a real woman. She's not a Madonna or a Paula Abdul or anything like that. She's writing songs about real people and herself, and she's a real person. She's very intellectual, very deep.
Holy Blood and Crescent Moon, your opera.
When I was first commissioned to do it, I knew nothing about opera. I thought it was just people shouting at each other in foreign languages. But I realized that it has to be a very powerful medium. It's wall-to-wall music. They sing everything. The story has to be so dramatic that they have to sing it. There's no realism like there is in a film where you have sequences that are designed to make the characters real. You're not worried about that. The only thing you're worried about is drama in opera. And it packs about the most powerful punch that any art form can pack. When the music and the drama and the singing and the acting and the staging all hit with that operatic power, there's nothing else that can fry you or can make your hair stand on end the way opera can. And it took me about a year to figure out how it works and what it's all about. Then I discovered Wagner, and everything changed. And so I wrote this opera. It went up in Cleveland. It was there for 5 days, packed houses, standing ovations. The critics were extreme. Let's see, Unredeemed Disaster was one thing. Smash Hit was another. The Cleveland paper had photographs of the audience, on the front page, picture of the audience dancing in the street outside the theater. You can't ask for a better response than that.
Yeah.
For a first-time composer, gee, this is unheard of. And so it was a pretty amazing moment.
Speaking of reviews, what do you make of rock criticism in general? Now, I realize that's a broad subject, but a lot of people think, well, sure, some of this is valid, and it's a valid school of scholarship, but a lot of it is very overblown. After all, this is entertainment, it's about energy, and let's not make this into an intellectual exercise and analyze it to death.
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. One is can be encapsulated by the Noel Coward line, that a bad review can spoil your breakfast but should not interfere with lunch. And there are those of that school who say they never read their reviews. Well, I read all my reviews. Don't believe anyone who says that they don't read their reviews. Everyone reads their reviews. And, or that you shouldn't read your reviews, or that you should only listen to sycophants. I think that the reviews are very useful, even if they're hostile. If you strip away the malice, even the preconceptions can be instructive. If people are looking at you the wrong way, it can tell you something about yourself. Even if they completely miss the point, it tells you that you haven't made your point clearly enough. And they don't represent the value of your work, really. They just show you a random perspective on it, because your audience is, the reviewers who will come to a show are a random selection. They're just anybody. They could be for you or against you. But the people in the seats of a theater, or the people who buy your record or whatever, are not random. They're the people who you have turned on and who like what you do, who respond. Particularly music is a very nebulous thing. No one can say why it affects one person positively and has no effect at all on someone else. I, for instance, am immune to Mozart, but I love Wagner. And there must be something wrong with me to be immune to Mozart, because it's obviously so brilliant. But that's just the way music works. And so the audience is not a random selection, the critics are. And the real thing is the response of the audience in the seats.
Time to say goodnight to Stuart Copeland, the founder of The Police, and most recently with Animal Logic. This album has come out only within the past month or so, and they're guessing that Spy on the House of Love will be the first hit single off of it. Good luck with it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Stuart Copeland, and we'll see you later.
Bob's guest Monday will be Hill Street Blues' Joyce Davenport, Veronica Hamill,